Paranormasight is a fourth wall breaking superpower pit fight, and I guess technically a horror story. At first glance, Paranormasight: The Seven Mysteries of Honjo looks like a bona fide horror visual novel, you know, creepy spirit on front cover, multiple characters running from an unknown horror, trailer with a dead girl right at the beginning. Within the first hour, however, everyone will realize quite quickly that rather than a horror visual novel, Paranormasight is more like a fourth wall breaking superpower battle show that happens to have a horror background. Think of stuff like Secret Game or Mirai Nikki, where all the characters are locked in a secluded battlefield, and where every contestant has a supernatural power that they have to keep hidden from others. Whether that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to the player themselves. Personally, I enjoy the direction they took. What I can say though is that despite how low budget the game kinda is, Paranormasight does a fantastic job of trying to push the medium of visual novels back into more of the adventure game side of things. The most standout feature of Paranormasight, even beyond how hard they try to break the fourth wall, is the 300-degree view function present in every scene. Basically, outside the portions where two characters are talking to each other, players are given free reign to look around the scene by panning left or right. This freedom of view extends all the way into the entire scene, with players able to spin every area 360 degrees, and the game is built with this idea in mind from the ground up. At first, a scene might be pretty empty, a character will point out something behind a player, swiveling around you will see nothing, and then swiveling back, bam, that girl is dead. This sort of thing is practically everywhere in this game. As telegraphed as it is, and as much as I deeply despise jump scares in general, I do think it does a good job of creating tension. Every time when you're required to swivel around a scene, there is a looming sense of apprehension at whether something new is gonna pop up, even when most of the time, nothing probably does. Still, if that was all there was to Paranormasight, this gimmicky kind of view thing, I probably wouldn't bother covering it here. Despite its overall short length, clocking in at probably less than 15 hours give or take, Paranormasight manages to create a decently thrilling narrative that doesn't overstate its welcome. The extent of how far they take this simple navigation tool alongside the fourth wall breaking nature of the game brings new meaning to the root of what a visual novel used to strive for as an interactive story. Let's take a few steps back though and go over Paranormasight a bit more broadly. Paranormasight: The Seven Mysteries of Honjo is a visual novel adventure game about the titular Seven Mysteries of Honjo. It follows the exploits of a group of unsuspecting individuals who end up becoming embroiled in a centuries-old ritual, the Rite of Resurrection. This ritual involves sacrificing the lives of many in order to bring back the life of one. Each participant comes in with their own reason for being in the ritual, whether they want to bring back a certain individual or want to stop others from committing further crimes. Regardless, unless the ritual has been completed or destroyed, they will be fated to fight one another until only one remains. In order to assist in this ritual, all participants inherit extreme murderous impulses from the grudges of those who died in the legend, pushing all of them to kill as much as possible. Published by Square Enix but created by Zine, who have a track record? I mean, they don't even have a Wikipedia page, which just shows how little they are known outside of Japan. Admittedly, I'm not too familiar with the group. From what I can tell, Zine is a company who mostly works with major developers in the background. They made Trials of Mana, a remake to Seiken Densetsu 3, the third game in the Mana series that never came out internationally until the release of this remake. They help on some arcade games, but predominantly they make VR and AR experiences. Not even really games, but more like VR museums, tour guide stuff, and so on. You can tell that these prior works really influenced how Paranormasight turned out, with the whole 360 view in every scene being incredibly reminiscent of any VR experience. Like I said in introduction, Paranormasight: The Seven Mysteries of Honjo has all the makings of a horror visual novel. If the creepy front cover, haunting no eye having little ghost girl wasn't enough, the entire game looks like it's shrouded in a permanent darkness filter. Upon starting the game though, you immediately run into what the game is really trying to play up, which is a sense of eeriness. The game primarily does this through fourth wall breaking. Upon first giving your name to the tall, creeping figure in a trench coat, he immediately disregards that name you gave and instead brings up the name of the console user. I imagine this will be startling if, like other people I know, I put my own name as a user, but I don't do that, so instead it just immediately made me realize what kind of game we're going to be dealing with here. As gimmicky as all this is though, It is pretty fun trying to see what they do next. I won't give too much away, but just as an example, there is a voice volume setting in this game and there are no voices. Working alongside all this interactivity is the plot of the game. While yes, they try to play up the horror vibes in the beginning, with the companion of our first main character falling victim to some evil ghost that had the powers to kill his victims by looking like they got kicked in the balls, it is Shogo attaining this very same power that really reveals what's going on here. Essentially, every big mystery of the town of Honjo came from their respective legend that occurred centuries ago. Upon touching the Cursed Echo, an artifact meant to embody each legend, the participant of this revival ritual is given all the information regarding how to use this Cursed Echo in order to kill others. These Cursed Echoes have requirements based on the story that occurred long ago. What starts out as a dreadful mystery quickly turns into a superpower fight with all the main characters basically having JoJo stands. Granted, these stands are floating corpses, but functionally they are exactly the same. Just like in that series, every encounter story becomes a fight where each character tries to discover what ability the other person has, while attempting to use their own at the same time. Bringing more attention to the fights is the fact that outside of the Cursed Echo holders, normal civilians are also present, so every meeting with another person is not just trying to discern what power they have, but also if they're even a threat in the first place. It's fun trying to figure this stuff out alongside each of the characters, and all the interactivity Paranormasight has just plays up this aspect to the nth degree. When you inevitably get killed by the opponent you are facing, you then get to retry and figure out what you need to do in order to evade this dead-end situation. It's a fun back and forth dynamic that persists all the way till the end. Considering the entire story is based on characters one-upping each other in a battle to the death, they are of course at the center of the story, especially since, unlike JoJo, the stands or the Cursed Echoes in this case don't have much of a presence, so we don't have supernatural beings battling each other while heroes are posing. Initially for the introduction, we follow Oki Shogo, a guy who the game itself calls unremarkable, someone who just goes with the flow and has an exceedingly normal life. His midnight run-in with Yoko, a young housekeeper with a fascination for the supernatural, ends up with Yoko dead on the floor and him attaining the Curse Echo, the Whispering Canal. This Curse Echo allows the user to kill anyone by drowning them so long as they turn away and try to leave the user. Shogo's entire chapter pretty much acts as an introduction to Paranormasight. We understand the basic concept of where the game takes place, we run into many of the characters for the first time as Shogo goes on a killing spree in order to revive Yoko, who mysteriously died in the beginning. We see the back and forth dynamic as Shogo has to outwit many of the other curse bearers in order to defeat them, and we quickly realize the fact that the players themselves are an important part in influencing the coming events, with many of Shogo's victories only coming from our interactions. It is at the end of Shogo's chapter, after he mysteriously winds up dead, that Paranormasight, the Seven Mysteries of Honjo truly begins, as we start to bounce between the real three protagonists of the game, alongside a mysterious fourth one whose identity is important to the plot. While finding out all the curse bearers and what their powers are is a big part of the introduction, I'll reveal the three main characters here since it's hard to talk about them otherwise, and at the start of each route, everything about the Curse Echo is immediately revealed to the player. Paranormasight does a fantastic job of making all three main characters incredibly distinct from one another. We have Sakazaki Yako, the headstrong high school girl who wants to get revenge for her childhood friend Michio, who supposedly commits suicide, but she believes there's more to the story than just that. Her Curse Echo is the Fool's Procession, which allows her to kill anyone who hears its music for 30 seconds without seeing the curse bearer. Next is Shigima Harue, a housewife who is a member of a family with deep ties to the police and married to an elite of the force. About a year ago, her son was kidnapped and eventually ended up murdered by the kidnapper due to a mistake with the detective on the case. This incident, alongside their already souring relationship, leads her and her husband basically having nothing to do with each other. Although the police drops the investigation, Harue calls up private investigator Richard Kai in order to find the killer. Her Curse Echo, the Haunting Clappers, enables her to make anyone who is in possession of a fire or fire-starting device combust. Finally, there's Tsutsumi Tetsuo, a veteran detective who is actually a member of the secret Paranormal Affairs Bureau within the Tokyo Police Department. Unlike just about everyone else in the ritual, he participates in order to prevent as many deaths as possible. His goal is to round up all the curse echoes without killing any of the wielders and arrest those who are guilty. His curse echo, the Evergreen Beach, allows him to hang anyone who lies to him. While all three character stories are happening simultaneously to the point where you're required to bounce between them in order to advance all three stories past dead end points, it's quite impressive how different these three main characters manage to be. Yako acts as the layman of the three, someone who kinda wants to kill others in order to revive a childhood friend, but has enough morals to realize this isn't the right way to go about it. Then we have Harue on the opposite side of the spectrum, someone who is perfectly willing to murder anybody and everybody so long as she can bring her poor boy back. Playing as her is a lot of fun since it always keeps the players on their toes, wondering when is she finally going to snap. Last is Tetsuo, who is easily the most experienced of the three, and is pretty much the only person who is actively trying to end the ritual. It's really interesting to try and see him take down all these superpower wielding foes without murdering anybody or actively using his own power. While these three are the main characters that we play as, equally as important to the plot is their partner, as each main character is accompanied by one throughout the entirety of the story. Yako has Mio, who is an apprentice sidekick already tasked with dealing with spiritual disturbances. She's got cool special powers to ward off evil. Mio is really the experienced mentor that's meant to guide Yako, who's completely new to all of this. Victor Kai, the private detective who Harue hired, is her partner, and he acts as the only thing keeping Harue from murdering everybody. His lighthearted, fun nature bounces off well against Harue, who always looks like she's one step from going off the deep end. I do think it's a little strange how Richter is the only character whose name got localized, which is something I haven't seen done in Japanese games for quite some time, with his original name being Kai Rihita. Lastly, Tetsuo is paired up with his co-worker Jun, a go-getter who became a police officer as he was inspired by heroes he saw in TV shows. Generally the most well-adjusted member of the entire cast, his youth and optimistic look on life allows him to accept the idea of cursed echoes, and he throws his whole being into helping Tetsuo solve the case. Jun's great. I think his only real weakness is his inexperience, but aside from that, he's really likable and balances well against the incredibly serious Tetsuo. Overall, the cast is very solid. The idea of any member of the cast being susceptible to doing evil at a moment's notice, thanks to a curse, makes for a much more interesting narrative than it would otherwise be. The central mystery does a good job of unraveling one by one what happens, and weaving together a different web of narratives that eventually come together. The smaller mysteries that the player have to solve in order to proceed to the next story event are actually pretty fun to go through, as the game requires a level of interactivity that isn't as simple as making choice A then choice B. Finding out what to do at each impasse in the story is the fun part, as it forces players to think outside the box a bit. Outside of one specific moment in the game where I did feel kinda lost on what I was supposed to do next, most of it goes by fairly smoothly. I'm not going to do a spoiler look at Paranormasight because I think it's short enough that if you are at all interested in everything I've said up till now, you can go check it out yourself right now. It's on Steam for like 20 bucks. The only major thing I wanted to reveal was specifically what kind of visual novel this is. If you came in thinking this was going to be some kind of horror story, you'd be in for quite a surprise once the stands start appearing. Paranormasight brings enough to the table that if you are someone who wanted to get into visual novels but needed a bit more spice than just purely reading, then this story is a pretty solid fit. For fans of the genre, the more fourth wall breaking investigation aspects of Paranormasight will be an interesting breath of fresh air that harkens back to more visual novels' adventure game roots. If you got anything you want to say about Paranormasight or any dumb questions you want to ask me, feel free to do so in the comments section below. All supporter stuff, like, subscribe, notifications are in the same place as always, and I'll see you later. Till next time.